Hello and welcome to another episode of What's Happening in Education. I'm John Silver, host and producer of the show, and I'm pleased to have several inspiring educators join me today in the community television studio. In our first segment, we will explore Mexican folkloric dance and the positive cultural and educational connections in Pajaro Valley schools. I'll be joined by parent educator, teacher, and dancer extraordinaire Ruby Vasquez, along with dancer and dance instructor Fernando Alcantar, and dancer and UCSC student Gabriel Johns Robledo, all members of the Watsonville-based Esperanza del Valle Folkloric Dance Troupe. Esperanza is incredibly celebrating their 30th anniversary this year. Next, I'm pleased to have Santa Cruz County Superintendent of Schools Michael Watkins back on the show. Michael was re-elected to a second term as superintendent this past spring, and today he will share his thoughts on the state of our county schools. We will also take a critical look at the education reform movement and some exciting and innovative programs happening in our county schools. Finally, we'll have the opportunity to hear from compelling education writer and New Brighton Middle School history teacher Andy Shapiro. Andy will take us through a number of popular myths about education, and he'll set the record straight with the actual facts. And now, I'd like to welcome Ruby Vasquez, Fernando Alcantar, and Gabriel Johns Robledo from Esperanza del Valle Folkloric Dance Troupe.
Hi,
welcome.
John. Hi, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. So, wow, it's pretty incredible that Esperanza del Valle, kind of based in Watsonville and real connected with the Pajaro Valley schools, is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. So, congratulations, and tell us a little bit about this tremendous journey and organization.
Well, thanks for having us, John. And yeah, Esperanza del Valle is celebrating 30 years this year. And it's been under the directorship of one person, all 30 years, believe it or not, and that's Janet Johns, who is an educator in Pajaro Valley Unified School District, currently working with the Migrant Education Program. But Janet began the group 30 years ago as a very, very young bilingual teacher. She had just graduated from San Jose State, came to Watsonville to teach, and found herself working in the community along with other colleagues who were working in a community with families and students, and they weren't of that same ethnic group, and so they wanted to learn more about the Mexican culture and the families that they were interacting with. So Janet just happened to have studied folklorico dance as a San Jose State University student, and her, along with Janet, Kika Urbina, another teacher, they decided to form Esperanza del Valle as a way to promote the Mexican culture and of tradition, the tradition of music and dance within the community, but also as educators to learn a little bit more about the families and students that they work with. So they started the group 30 years ago, and it's still going very strong today.
Yeah, and we'll explore a little bit more about the various things you do, including bringing dance from different regions of Mexico, bringing master dancers up here to train and mentor folks. You've gotten into the theater business by doing choreo dramas, which are dramatizing stories with dance and song and music. But let's hear from Fernando a little bit. So tell us about how you got involved in Esperanza and what it means to you, how it's been important in your life as a resident, as a community person, and as a dancer.
Well, it's been a really important part of my life to kind of know where I'm coming from, especially with Esperanza del Valle. It's about a culture that when I was in Mexico, when I was younger, I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't really involved with my roots. When I came to this country, I was 17 years old, and I saw Esperanza del Valle performing, and I didn't even know the name of the region that they were doing, and it was kind of shame for me to be Mexican and not knowing the culture of my own country. So I took a class in Cabrillo College. That's when I started taking classes about folklorico, and I started working with Janet, and then Janet invited me to be part of Esperanza del Valle. And I started working, I started getting really involved, and I took it, I embraced it like my own culture, to know my own culture, the Mexican. And it was really important for me because that helped me to kind of to survive in this country, to be more proud of them being Mexican and being so proud of my culture. And it did a really big impact. Janet, I mean, is a wonderful lady that not only she taught me the regions, the steps, as well, the roots and the culture. And she made a big change in my life.
So Gabe, so Janet, the artistic director, happens to be your mom. So you've been involved and connected with this really since you were quite young. So tell us a little bit about your experience kind of growing up in this environment and then getting involved in dancing yourself.
Well, you know, growing up around all of this, I had to be at every single rehearsal, and
like it or not. Huh?
Like it or not, if I cried, I would probably be teased by a lot of the people. You know, but it was really great growing up. It felt like I was the little, you know, the little one running around playing in the mud while Mom and Ruby, especially when we visited the Huasteca. We made our trips down to Veracruz, and Mom and Ruby and a lot of the other people in the dance group, they went and they studied with the indigenous groups. And of course I was just playing in the mud at the time, but I also was, you know, learning a lot about the culture and you know, I guess when you know that, you figure, oh, everybody knows about that. Growing up, everybody knows about the roots, but you know, it kind of is one of those things that I definitely am close to, and I don't even have to think about where I come from, what's my background as a Mexican American, and you know, it's nice.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Esperanza has helped, you know, people who have Mexican backgrounds connect with their roots and their culture, and it's also had a cross-cultural impact of exposing the broader community to what's such an important cultural and dance tradition coming from Mexico. Yeah. So say a little bit about the impact in school, because as you grew up, there's lots of dance performances, activities, music, and so on as you came up through, you know, public school in Watsonville High and so on. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, especially in elementary school, I went to Alianza Charter School, and I remember Mom's dance group would come and they would dance and do for rallies and assemblies, and I would always feel special because you know, I knew the people in the group, and I remember always all the kids were always so impressed, especially when they did the machete dance. And they would throw the machetes, and everybody was like, "Oh wow, that's so cool!" And I always wanted to be one of those people up there. I know I always looked up to people like Fernando and the older people in the dance group, especially the men. It was a nice, you know, nice thing to look up to as a kid, and just want to strive to be, you know, like them and want to be able to dance like them, and you know, a nice figure for me to grow up with.
And now you are dancing like them and with them, huh?
Yeah, right alongside them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about Esperanza's connection in the schools and some of the different programs and activities that you've been doing over the years and even today.
Okay, well, in the community we do all types of, you know, free performances, whether it's for the, you know, the yearly Fiestas Patrias performance downtown to, you know, somebody's wedding or quinceañera. We do, when we do bring in the master teachers from Mexico, we always feel obligated to have some type of a open studio so that community members can come and learn from these master teachers. Let's see, in the schools, we are part of the Spectra offerings, so often we will get invited from schools to go and perform at their schools. Pretty much we're available when there's any kind of need from the community and they need a Mexican dance troupe, they will call Esperanza del Valle. You know, when there was an earthquake relief type of effort, the flood, all of those people knew that they can call and Esperanza would be there to dance. And it's just been an important part of the community when we're out and about distributing flyers for this upcoming performance, you know, people are just like, oh, we can't wait to go see you guys again. You know, we're so proud and we're so happy that you guys are still together as a group. And again, I think it's been, you know, primarily the efforts of Janet, who's been the director for 30 years, and also the group itself. I mean, we have become like a family. I mean, we've known each other for so many years. And we welcome the young people who are coming in. We continue these traditions with the youth groups and the children's groups. Fernando has a group that he directs, Grupo Genesis. I have a group that I direct, Estrellas de Esperanza. And we're committed. We're committed to just continue these traditions of dance and music and culture.
Yeah, no, and that's really terrific because as we've been discussing, you know, funding for arts and culture is just not there in the schools the way it used to be, the way it should be. And so having a group that's community-based, that volunteers and comes in and does not only performances but workshops and gets students and youth involved is really an important contribution to the community. And so, you know, on behalf of the community, thanks to you guys for being here for so long and still doing your thing. Fernando, tell us a little bit about, it seems almost as an offshoot, many of the dancers in Esperanza are teachers, are not young kids, but then you've also gone on to develop a youth dance group. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Genesis, I've been working with Genesis for the last 16 years, and I have around 44 students. And basically, it's just talk about, you know, what's the Mexican culture, it's kind of find out who you are and be proud of who you are. And through Esperanza del Valle, and I've been learning a lot of things that I'm taking to the community, to this group, and this group is taking to their families, to their friends, and be support of this event. For me, it's a big familia that we're just coming together and work and be proud of who we are and talk about the roots. So that's basically pretty much. And we just have a show like 2 weeks ago for a 2-hour show, and we have really good reaction for their people, for their own community.
Mm-hmm. Any other impacts, Gabe, you see on your fellow students coming up through school related to the dance and also the music?
Yeah, I know a lot of students are really interested in, especially just, you know, Mexican culture in general, but especially with the dance. I know at my high school they started a group, and everybody really, I think, I always get good reactions when people are coming to the shows, when people are talking about the shows that they've seen, because I think it's just one of those things that a lot of people aren't. It's even Mexican people, especially Mexican American people, aren't getting all the time. And it's nice to be involved in the schools and the education system, where we know this is part of what most of the kids in the PPUSD district. This is part of their culture. This is part of what their background is, and it's great to, I guess, be involved in the schools. The students, and I know a lot of students say, you know what, I think I might want to do that. And new people are joining groups. You know, people my age are just saying, I want to learn how to dance, and they'll try to get in contact with mom, and they'll try to get in contact with people like Fernando and other people that are in Watsonville and Santa Cruz County.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're just about out of time, but I also would like to ask you just one last question, is that lots of times when people think, you know, folkloric dance from Mexico, they maybe think just one kind, one style, one region, and people don't realize the diversity, just like we don't always realize that in this country. We're different peoples, different cultures, different regions, we have different customs. And I know through watching Esperanza over the years that there's not just one folkloric dance,
right,
that you guys do dances from many different regions in Mexico. Right. And just in the minute we have left, tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
diversity.
yeah, we do. I think that probably comes from our educator background, that we feel an obligation to represent the Mexican culture and community in the diversity that exists there. So, and in a very respectful way. So there are, like, when people come to the show, to this anniversary show, they're going to see dances from the state of Nayarit, from Jalisco, and within that state of Jalisco, we're going to dance 2 versions of dances that come from Jalisco. We're going to show dances from the Huasteca region of San Luis Potosí. We're going to show dances from Chihuahua, which is more of the northern state, and you'll hear the accordion. I mean, you'll hear the different flavors of influences that have influenced the Mexican culture. So we hope our community comes out and supports us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we're out of time, so I want to thank you, the three of you, for coming in today. And I want to encourage the community to check out Esperanza del Valle and their anniversary performance. And if you missed the anniversary performance, they're going to be around because they've been a mainstay in this community. And so keep looking for them and show up. And it's usually a wonderful experience, amazing dance with amazing music and amazing local people. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
And we'll catch you next time on the show.
Gracias.
Okay, we'll be right back.
High school sports are back on television. We'll be covering all of our county schools, both boys and girls sports, all year long. It's on CTV, Comcast 25, Charter 71, and streaming on our website, communitytv.org. Every Sunday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Root for your home team on CTV.
Welcome back. I'm pleased to have in the studio with me now Michael Watkins, Superintendent of Schools for Santa Cruz County. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Pleasure being here again.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. So we're into a new year already in school, and let's start by giving us a little overview of what is the state of Santa Cruz County schools now as we enter the 2010-11 school year.
I think we're on an upswing. I think it's still very challenging given the cuts at the state level, and the schools have had to deal with these cuts. To this county, about a $40 million cut to public education over the past 2 years. So that's put schools back on their heels, but I do see them rallying around and really providing a quality education program for all, really trying to still continue that on that path.
And what about, so countywide, what has the situation been? I mean, you got the test results back from testing, and we're always looking at that, and schools are being judged and evaluated on that. Are we making progress? Did we have setbacks? How would you?
Well, let me first of all say, in California and in Santa Cruz County, the demographics are unique. In California, for example, schools deal with 50 different languages. In Santa Cruz County, over half the students that come to public schools are offered a free or reduced lunch, so they're socioeconomically disadvantaged. And 1/3 of our students are English language learners. Secondarily, I think although the test scores are improving, I'm not a strong proponent of standardized testing to evaluate programs in schools.
Well, that's good, and I know that many educators are working towards looking at multiple measures of school performance, of teacher effectiveness, and including, providing the adequate supports to teachers and students and the resources. So tell me a little bit more about the other kinds of ways we should be looking at our schools and their performance beyond standardized testing.
There are a number of ways that students can demonstrate their competence in any given subject. It could be a portfolio, it could be an essay, it could be an oral presentation. There are a number of ways that we can evaluate how well a student's doing in any particular class. But let me say, I think that's the antithesis of where the Obama administration is going with public education. Their Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, is a strong proponent of some of the No Child Left Behind tenets. And they're still looking at standardized testing to evaluate maybe teachers, in fact, to see if they are successful, that whole value-added piece, tracking a student's performance.
Yeah, so that is a challenge, and I want to come back to that issue in a minute, but a little bit more. You started to go into the budget. So again, because this is such a critical issue, and we know that California, I think, is about 47th or 48th in the nation out of 50 states in terms of per pupil funding. So could you explain to us a little bit about how are the schools funded in California, and maybe what the problem with it is?
Well, about 60% of the money comes from the state. And that's after, in 1980, we passed Proposition 13. Heretofore, that about 85% of funding came from property tax revenue, local property tax revenue. So now only 20% comes from property tax revenue because of Proposition 13. So the states had to come in and backfill that. And as you know, as the state economy goes up, ebbs and flows, that's not a very good mark to or measure to really support public education. So you're right, public education in Santa Cruz, in California has dipped to 49th. In fact, in pre-Prop 13 days, we were actually 15th in the nation in per pupil expenditures. So we never really found a way to address that shortfall from the dip in property tax revenue and the shifting to the state revenue.
And doesn't that uncertainty in what the revenues are mean that actually our schools don't know what their budgets are, not only in the spring before the next school year, but even sometimes going into the school year?
Well, absolutely. I think this year, for example, the state just passed their budget. And the mantra is that we've given schools an additional $3 billion. But the reality is 1.9 of that, $1.9 billion has been deferred to next year. And the 1.7, other 1.1 billion promised is still on the table because there's still going to be a significant deficit this year. So you're right, schools have had to scramble each and every year and play catch up at the whims of the state and some of the politics, and frankly, that goes on at the state level. We've not been able to raise revenues because it takes 2/3, as you know, to raise revenue, and I think we need to look at new revenue enhancement ways because schools have cut to the bone. Essentially, I was talking to one superintendent, and I guess a rule of thumb, maybe 85% of your budget would be on personnel. Now it's almost to 93 or 94% on personnel. There's no place else to cut.
Wow. So we know how important education is. Yeah. We're struggling with it. Our budget process doesn't work very well. And we may have we will have a new administration in Sacramento. The elections are about to happen. What direction do you advocate that we move in terms of changing the way we do our budgets, particularly for education?
Well, I mentioned I think that the 2/3 is important around the budget. I think that's critical. But also I think we need to value education in this country. It's been devalued, in my opinion, over the past 25 years. And I think a lot of that has to do with de-emphasizing the important role that teachers make in a community. They really haven't had a raise. I'm not here to support the teacher raises, but I can tell you when you come through college, you want to be a stand-up teacher and you have 6 or 7 years of college, and you come out making $35,000 with a $50,000 college debt, it doesn't add up. We need to really emphasize the importance of a quality education for this country, and the market will make it.
So you're saying if education is so important, then we need to treat our teachers that way and recognize, their professionalism, the years of study and schooling that it takes.
And actually the whole profession. In other words, let's say you're a working family, a working mother, a working father, a single mother. You may not have an opportunity to go visit your child's school. Maybe we can turn that around and give them, have the employers subsidize the employers to give that parent an hour or two off a week to visit her school, meet with the teacher. It's very difficult for working parents who are working from 7 to 5 every day. So I think the whole shift should be on public education, not just with the teacher, but how we rethink it.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to entail, changing some of our priorities, but also probably raising more revenues. Is that not the case?
We've cut pretty much to the bone. I think in California, New Jersey, for example, I believe spends about $18,000 on per pupil expenditure. We may spend in California about $8,000, and for charter schools, it's even less in many situations. So clearly, we would have to raise revenue. I don't think in California you can shift too many priorities. If you look at the budget, you look at how it may support, mental health, law enforcement or prison systems and schools. There's not a lot of flexibility there. So again, revenue is going to have to be raised somewhere. And I think if Santa Cruz County feels it's important as a county to support public education, we may have to look within to look at some of the revenue enhancement possibilities that we can do to support public education.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, so one possibility could be looking at sales tax and corporate tax rates.
The corporate tax rates are still tied to Prop 13 in large degree, and that's still an issue. But I think really you're right. Sales tax, if you want to look at a sin tax, local parcel taxes or bonds. I think all those are possibilities, and I wouldn't advocate for one over the other, but I think if we want to ensure the success of this future generation, we need to ensure they have a quality school program to go to. Not to say that we don't have a quality now, but I think that as the cuts have taken hold in the school programs, I see everyone really working 115%, and I don't know how long teachers can sustain that really rigorous workload without really having a difficult time with it myself.
So could you tell us a little bit more about where our schools are taking the hits from all these budget cuts? I mean, I know.
Well, I don't think. I mean, look, everywhere. First of all, let me say everywhere. I know that with the County Office of Education, for example, we ran a summer school credit recovery program this year for the districts, because if we didn't, those students would not graduate in June of 2011. So we jumped into a whole different arena and served maybe over 300 kids who had to catch up on their credits because districts couldn't afford that. We came in last year with the Second Opportunity Program school in Pajaro, which is on the chopping block for adult education, which is really no longer funded really per se, or been defunded significantly. We've come in, so what you're going to have to do is create different partnerships and linkages and look at resources differently to support public education. Yeah. And we were doing that, but it's a challenge every step of the way. A lot of the funding we're using now is some of the stimulus money, and that's been very helpful in trying to maintain program. When that sunsets in September of 2011, I do have some concerns, but yeah.
So the road's not getting any easier yet.
It's challenging, but I got to tell you, I mean, all of the hits that teachers are taking and teachers' unions are taking, you have to go back and think, why were teachers' unions instituted? And were unions instituted originally? And again, there was some worker protection. I was in, I won't even say the state, fairly recently, and I was talking with a teacher. This is, a couple of months ago, talking with a teacher, well, a wannabe teacher. I had met with her separately, but she felt in this particular state she could not get a foothold because there was too much nepotism and cronyism. So, I mean, you go back to unions, and there is some protection on that end. But I also must say that I've been in this business for, as you know, almost 40 years, and I think unions are coming to the table for when there is an underperforming teacher. The ones I've been involved with now, they are at the table with us trying to do a remedial plan for that teacher or helping us evaluate that teacher out. No one wants an underperforming teacher in their classroom. I have kids in public school, my grandkids are in public school, and I wouldn't stand for it either. So I would be a strong proponent if I thought that abolishing tenure were the answer, but it's bigger than that. It's really mentoring, professional development, those type of things that we talked about, John.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you mentioned this. So in part of the education reform movement, and now it's been in the media a lot, we had this big summit, Education Nation on NBC, and sure. And we've had this Waiting for Superman, which is a film just being released that's making a big issue. And it seems like a lot of the focus is that public education is failing, teachers are failing, our schools are failing, and some of the answers being pushed are that unions are the problem, teachers' unions need to be gotten rid of, sure. Tenure is an obstacle that needs to be gotten rid of. We need to continue to rank schools and teachers based on standardized test scores. And so this is a little disturbing direction that we're going in certain aspects. And I know that you have shared a book with me and some other folks by Diane Ravitch, who was actually in the Bush administration's education department and was one of the architects of No Child Left Behind. And now she's written a book, The Death and Life of the Great American School System, How Testing and Choice Undermine Education. So from her work actually promoting and developing these policies over the last number of years, she's come to see, in her own words, that she was wrong and mistaken about these policies. And it seems that this is not the direction that a lot of the discussions are going. So could you share a little bit of your insight as to what this is about?
Well, I applaud her for, she spent, like you mentioned, she was the Assistant Secretary of Education in the Bush administration and really one of the architects behind No Child Left Behind. it takes a lot of guts to come out and say that, you know what, I was wrong. We're going down a ill-gotten path with the standardized testing, the punitive nature that we're trying to hold schools accountable to, and also the privatization and choice that we were trying to go down with charter schools. So she's come out and said, look, there are different ways that we can measure success, that we can really support teachers without taking this whole carrot-stick approach. Unfortunately, the Obama administration has glommed onto this, and they're still moving down with Secretary of Education Duncan down this path. And I hope over the next year, when the Elementary Secondary Education Act is renewed in the federal government, that they will take a different look at trying to evaluate the effectiveness of public education, because these aren't this is not a research-based approach or evidence-based approach. It was one that was concocted, and we'll try it. It didn't work. Let's look at some other things now.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be important to have voices like yours and other educators and teachers and parents and community putting this forth, you know, to the Obama administration,
Absolutely.
to our state officials, and begin to see that the model we've been doing hasn't worked that well, and there are other approaches.
No.
And that's around supporting our schools, our teachers, supporting professional development. We can't abandon the public schools.
Right.
In other words, we have a lot of charter schools that are very innovative and doing some good things,
Sure.
but the reality is 90+% of all our students are in public schools.
Right.
That is the democratic institution that needs to support the education of the masses of our children, and we need to support that process.
Eloquently stated. And one last piece, I know we're running short on time, but today I just read where the governor vetoed what's called CalPADS, a longitudinal achievement assessment system that we've been working on for the past 8 years. It's really trying to track data for our students, and the governor vetoed that, earmarked those dollars, you know, for that particular program, which could have a devastating effect on how we understand where we're moving in public education. So we really need to have strong advocates who say, look, we want that data so we can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just about out of time.
Okay.
Michael, I'd like to just ask you one quick last question. Tell me about one program in the county office that you're excited about, that's innovative, that's making a difference.
There's many, but there are many, but I'll stick with one. About 2 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, I realized the high cost of teacher training. In other words, the high cost of a teacher wanting to get into the profession. So we partnered with the San Joaquin County Office of Education to have our own credentialing program for students who want to go into the arena of special education. We have a cohort of 25 teachers now, and I must say it's demanding, but we've been able to offer a cost-effective credential program to 25 local teachers teaching in this community with high quality and saving them probably over $20,000. I'm very proud of that program, and I think at some point you should have them on your show, John. I think they would be a good testament to growing your own locally. I think I'm a strong proponent of that.
Well, that's great. And on that note, Michael, I want to thank you so much for coming in. We'll have you back to keep us updated on what's going on.
I look forward to it.
And keep up the good work.
Oh, keep up the nice work too as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
And we'll be right back.
Check out Community Television of Santa Cruz County for the best and most extensive local election coverage. From city councils to school, water, and fire boards, we've got your local candidates covered. For schedules and to watch programs, go to our website at communitytv.org. And don't forget to tune in Tuesday night, November 2nd, for live coverage of local election results. Which candidate are you voting for?
Hi, welcome back. Now I'm joined by Andy Shapiro, who is a middle school teacher at New Brighton Middle School and is also been an amazing education columnist over the last number of years, writing an article, a column in the Sentinel on education. And welcome, Andy.
Thank you, John.
I'm glad to have you back on the show. And you know, you share with me a piece you were writing about myths and realities. It was related to California education in particular. And I think it's so important because right now there is so much talk about public education in the broader community beyond the education community. We've had this Education Nation, we have a new big film coming out. So there's a lot of talk about how public schools are failing and teachers are failing, and we need to punish schools and get rid of tenure and get rid of unions and hold teachers accountable. And of course we know that teachers are the most important ingredient in creating a good education for students, and I think we both believe that we need to support, train, and nurture our teachers as the professionals they are, so that we can really try to provide a good education for all students. And so that being a starting point, there's a lot of information out there that is sometimes stereotypical or seems commonsensical, but really doesn't cut to the chase. And that so intrigued me about the piece you were writing. So if we could just go back and forth a bit, and I'm going to highlight some of the myths that you have identified and get you to explain to us what the real deal is.
Thank you.
So, given our current economic struggles, there must be cuts in all aspects of government spending, including education. That's somewhat common wisdom these days. And what is your response to this myth?
Yeah, and I recognize that we are going through extraordinary budgetary times, but I believe we have to prioritize. And I think the education of our students, especially K-12 and college education, should be the top priority with our budget. I also think a lot of people have gotten a free pass over the last few years. California is the only state that does not have an oil extraction fee. That could raise a couple of $1 billion a year from what I understand. Returning the car tax to what we paid in the late 90s would raise billions more. Having the federal government return what we invest, what amount of taxes we pay, would also help a lot. We pay right now, we would get about almost 80 cents back for each dollar we pay in federal taxes. Comes back to California. If that came closer to an actual dollar, then that would be billions more. So there are many ways to resolve this budgetary crisis without further cutting education, because we've already made so many cuts that we are in a crisis in our public schools. I don't use that word lightly, but there is a crisis going on with cuts to all kinds of important programs, and we've identified a lot of those in the past. I won't go through that list again. But given the problems we're dealing with, we need to find a way to prioritize education, and there are many ways to do that.
Absolutely, good point. Another myth you identify: in order to be competitive and avoid losing businesses, we must not raise corporate taxes.
Yeah, and that fits in a little bit with the previous point. Right now we're hearing a lot from corporations and from those who advocate for them about how we can't raise corporate taxes in an economic downturn because that will hurt business. There are economists who will tell you that that's true, but if you look at what really makes a difference in the economy, it's getting people jobs and getting money into the hands of those who are hurting or middle-class people. And at this time in our history, corporations are paying some of the lowest historical tax rates they've paid. And it's incredible to me that at this time, California last year passed a $1.4 billion tax cut for some of the largest, wealthiest corporations in our state, as we were cutting tens of billions from other programs. And I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense to me. The only way I could see something like that happening is excessive influence that corporations have in our state and our country, for that matter. And I think that's largely due to the political contributions they make. And of course, that Supreme Court decision that came down a few months back that allows corporations to spend unlimited amounts, and unions as well, in elections. I think that's a very damaging, has a very damaging effect on our democracy, because we should make decisions based on what is good for our communities and our state and our country, not what's good for a very isolated slice of that, which is our corporations. It also feeds in, I know I'm talking a lot about this one, it also feeds into a problem, which is that over the last 30 years or so, the wealthy have done very, very well in this country. The difference between the wealthiest 1% and the other 99% has dramatically increased over the last 30 years. And again, that's largely due to the impact of those who lobby on behalf of the wealthy. And that includes, in many cases, corporate CEOs and such. And so I'm really concerned. I think that's a really big issue. And I see a lot of structural problems that cause us to benefit corporations over schools and other people in need.
Point well taken. Another myth you identify is, since approximately 40% of California's budget goes to K-12 education, school districts struggling to balance their budget have only themselves to blame.
Yeah. My response to that is that California is either 47th or 48th in per pupil spending, depending on which statistics you look at, which tells you that we are underfunding our schools. It's not simply that we're getting all this money and therefore we're not spending it well. The argument that there's a huge amount of waste and abuse in our schools, I don't believe it's true. I have seen a couple examples of money that hasn't been well spent, mostly on facilities, but a lot of times that's because of state and federal requirements about how construction has to be undertaken. But by and large, we are operating on what I would call a shoestring budget in our schools, and I don't believe that we are excessively funded and have a lot of room to make cuts at this point. I think we've cut out not only the fat, but we've cut some of the bone as well.
A lot of the bone.
And now we're going into the essential organs as well. So
not a lot left to cut there. Another myth you talk about is that programs like No Child Left Behind and now more recently Race to the Top that demand new accountability measures along with a few morsels of funding will help improve student achievement more than spending this money in other ways.
Right. And I don't think that's true. In fact, I'm quite clear it's not true. The amount of time and energy, both in personnel and actual money that's spent to cross all the T's and dot all the I's to meet the requirements of both of those programs could be going to other places. And if the federal government simply did one thing, they adequately funded special education, that one act would make a much bigger difference in our schools than the other two combined, because that would actually be, right now the federal government doesn't fulfill its obligation to reimburse states and school districts for the money that we spend on special education. And I wanted to say, I think special education is an incredibly important program. I'm in no way suggesting cuts to special education. I'm suggesting that the federal government and the state government both fulfill its obligation to adequately fund it. If they're requiring us to spend this money, which it can often be quite expensive to fulfill the obligations required for special education, that they should fund it. That should be funded. And the federal government has continually made promises to do that, including when No Child Left Behind was originally passed. Part of that was with an agreement that special education be funded. But what happened was all the mandates and requirements were written in indelible ink, but the actual funding mechanisms were written in erasable pencil, and those were erased the next time around. So it's unfortunate.
Yes. Let's go on. So another myth you identify is that school funding is the only significant structural problem with our schools.
Yeah, I don't want to pretend that if we had adequate funding, all of a sudden our schools will be world class, because I see some other problems with them. One of the biggest problems I see is relating to the standards. And they're focused primarily on recall of information and not nearly enough on critical thinking skills like analysis, synthesis, deeper comprehension, application of ideas to new situations. Those are all the skills that we use in real life once we're out of school. And those are the skills you need in most jobs that you do. So I think those are and even being a citizen, being someone who's adequately informed and can think critically about the issues that are out there and then can vote accordingly, I think those are important skills that we need to teach our students. There is some of that. I don't want to say that there's no critical thinking going on, but I think the standards are too heavily tilted towards recall of information and not nearly enough towards critical thinking skills.
And the standards can be used in a variety of ways, and it seems like there are some good standards, but when the ultimate test of everything is performance on standardized tests, then it tends to get more narrowly focused, as you say, on recall of information and memorization, and not moving up what we call Bloom's taxonomy to get to the more higher level and critical thinking skills that are, I think what you're saying, really what's essential to have students be fully educated and able to participate in society with all their talents and skills.
And I believe in accountability. I don't want to say that I'm not a believer in accountability, but what we're doing now I think we've gone out of control with the amount of testing we do and the type of testing we do. If we lose 2 weeks a year just testing, we lose periods leading up to that because the kids are all thinking about the test and teachers are preparing for the tests in a lot of cases. And not to say that that's not instructional. We can do instruction at the same time to prepare them for the testing. But we do lose some instructional time when we're doing the tests. And then, of course, once the tests are finished, even though there's over a month left in the year, the students have the mentality, and maybe even some teachers, I don't know for sure about that, but they have a mentality that school's over. And so we lose that extra month of instructional time after testing is completed, and that concerns me.
Well, and to me, assessment is so important for
That's
teachers to understand what their students are able to do and what they need support to get to the next level. And so one of the problems with standardized testing is that this is not a diagnostic test. Teachers, parents, and students don't even get the results of these tests till the next school year. So the standardized testing and then the test results are not really used to do what we should be doing with assessment, is using it to learn more about our students and figure out better ways to meet their learning needs.
Right. Assessment should inform instruction, ideally.
Right.
That in an ideal world. And at our school, we do use it. Like, we look back at specifically what areas our students are having a challenging time in, and then we use that to inform our instruction. So there is some usefulness. I don't want to pretend that there's no usefulness at all, but it's just out of control. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that it's just gone too far with what we're doing, and the type of testing is not what I think is most beneficial for students.
Great. So another myth that you identified is that California has the highest standards in the nation. What do you mean?
The reason I call that a myth is similar to what we were talking about before. It's focusing heavily on recall of information. I think California standards are the most difficult to attain in the nation because there are so many of them, and it's really vast. What we need to get through in the course of a year, starting in first grade, even in kindergarten, and all the way through high school, is really, really difficult. However, many of the standards focus on recall, which again is not the highest level thinking skill, and that's why I don't think California standards are as high as many people claim they are.
And then let's hit one more myth here. You say that if we eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, we can resolve the state budget deficit and adequately fund public education without additional revenues or major spending cuts.
Right. That is one of the most destructive myths that's out there right now, in my opinion, because what that is saying is that if only we could use our money more efficiently, we would have enough. Right now, California is dealing with, the last 3 years, anywhere between a $20 billion and a $40 billion deficit, depending on the year, $42 billion one year. And there's no one that I know who could identify $42 billion of waste and abuse in a $100 billion budget. It's just not there. And there might be $1 billion here or there, and I'm not saying that's small change. We should identify waste and abuse. We should eliminate it. We should find ways to spend money on what the greatest needs are. I'm not saying there's no waste or abuse, but there's nowhere near enough to adequately fund education and other important programs. And so I think personally, I think we either need to raise revenues or just prioritize differently.
Absolutely. So you've hit on a number of myths, and now just to sort of sum it all up, so what do you see as our big challenge, and what direction do you think we need to go?
I think we need to change the political system. And I think that the one reform that would make the biggest difference both for federal and state politics and adequately funding schools and other important programs is public financing of campaigns. If we had publicly financed campaigns, it would take corporate money out of the equation, it would take union money out of the equation. People would be running with the public interest in mind, and they wouldn't be passing laws based on what lobbyists tell them to do, because the money wasn't coming from the corporations those lobbyists represent or the unions those lobbyists represent. It would be the people, we the people, that's the Constitution. It would be funding it for we, the Californians, the people of the United States. It would just take corrupt money out of the public arena and change the values of a lot of the people that are now running for office. It might not change their values, it would change who runs for office. It would probably get a lot more publicly minded people who are running, and it wouldn't allow them to be so easily influenced once they were in office to change their ways. The other big reform that I think kind of fits in with that is when we have term limits, and especially as short as 6 years in the state legislature, what it means is that you have a lot of new people in those positions. and they're the most susceptible to being influenced by the moneyed interest, for lack of a better term. And so a lot of times they're too busy to learn what they really need to do to, to read all the material or to do their jobs in a really thorough and thoughtful way. And so they let the lobbyists come in and dictate what to do. And that affects education in the end. I mean, that has a huge impact that translates to what we see at the ground level in our classrooms, because we don't get enough resources, and the kinds of standards and assessments we do are not always based on what's the most thoughtful, public interested way to do that. So.
Great. Andy, we're about out of time, so
okay.
I want to thank you for your always so thoughtful look at education issues and our priorities and where we need to go. This has been very informative, and I think that we need to be pushing on a number of these issues so that we can enter the dialogue as teachers, as educators, as community people, and not let it be driven by a small sector of our leadership that is been not taking us down the path that we really need to go down to support public education as a bedrock of our democracy. So thank you for all you do, and next time I'm going to get you in here, we'll have a little more time to talk about some of the good things that you're doing in your classroom and in your school here in Santa Cruz.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on, John.
Okay.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Andy. That's it today. Thanks for tuning in. I'd like to thank the volunteers and staff at Community Television for helping make this program possible. And until next time, I'm John Silver, and you've been watching What's Happening in Education. We'll catch you later.